Here is a pattern worth starting with. The supplier most likely to cost you money is rarely the one with the sloppy profile. It is the one who looks flawless: polished storefront, verified badges, fast replies, professional photos. Those signals are easy to buy or fake. The signals that actually protect you take deliberate effort to check, and most importers never check them. So this video does something different. Instead of a generic tips list, it treats supplier verification as a system. Every major scam type in cross-border sourcing maps to a specific countermeasure, and those countermeasures only work in combination. We will walk the layers, then turn all of it into a single number using a scoring tool we developed, the Import Smarter Supplier Confidence Score. There are 4 core risk types: identity fraud, quality fraud, payment scams, and IP theft. Every layer that follows targets at least one directly. That pattern of preventable loss is consistent across global sources sourcing scam guidance and the US government's trade.gov supply chain due diligence advisories. Start where everyone starts, the platform, but understand what its signals mean. According to Alibaba's own trade assurance documentation, Gold Supplier status is a paid membership tier. It is not an independent verification of legitimacy, manufacturing capability, or factory ownership. It tells you the company paid a fee. That is it. Alibaba also distinguishes manufacturers from trading companies. A trading company is an intermediary that buys from a factory and resells to you, adding a margin, reducing your quality control leverage, and complicating accountability when something goes wrong. Neither is automatically disqualifying, but you need to know which one you are dealing with before you wire anything. In my experience, the moment a manufacturer gets vague about their own production line is the moment to slow down and ask for the factory's business license directly. Trade assurance does provide order protection when you pay through the platform, but with specific conditions and coverage caps set out in Alibaba's documentation. Read those terms before assuming you are covered. Platform signals are a starting point, not a verdict. Next, confirm the company legally exists. China's State Administration for Market Regulation runs a publicly accessible national enterprise credit database, the National Enterprise Credit Information Publicity System. Search any Chinese company by name or registration number to see its legal registration, its legal representative, its business scope, and any recorded violations. The registry needs the supplier's Chinese registered name or registration number, not the English trade name they use with you. Ask for it directly, or use Chichacha or Tianyancha, which offer English language interfaces over the same SAMR data. Here is the limitation the standard advice glosses over. SAMR confirms a legal entity with that name exists. It cannot confirm that the person emailing you actually represents that entity. A well-documented fraud pattern, flagged in both Global Sources scam guidance and trade.gov advisories, involves impersonating a real factory using genuine registration details, cloned websites, and authentic photos. SAMR is your identity baseline. The factory audit is what closes the gap between a registration and a real operation. That gap closing step is a third-party factory audit. A standard audit from QIMA typically costs a few $100s, small next to the deposit on even a modest order, and cheap insurance against a facility that cannot produce what it claims. 3 firms operate extensively in China, and a common mistake is treating them as interchangeable. Per QIMA's own factory audit guidance, QIMA is positioned as faster and more accessible for smaller importers, with digital reporting and competitive pricing. Bureau Veritas brings deep expertise in regulated categories: textiles, electronics, food contact materials. SGS is one of the largest global testing networks, preferred when documentation must satisfy a retailer or customs authority. Rule of thumb: fast and low-cost first check, QIMA. Regulated category with documentation demands, Bureau Veritas or SGS. And note the distinction QIMA's guidance makes explicit. Standard audits are scheduled in advance, while an unannounced audit is a distinct, usually premium service you must specifically request when misrepresentation risk is high. From our own importing projects, the audit report earns its cost less by catching outright fraud and more by revealing the smaller gaps, capacity that is thinner than promised, or quality systems that exist on paper but not on the floor. Now protect the quality itself. Picture a container arriving 3 months after you approved samples. The finish is different, the tolerances are off, the material feels cheaper. And when you push back, the supplier notes you have no signed documentation defining what correct looks like. They are right. The fix: request pre-production samples, test them independently against relevant safety or performance standards, and retain a signed countersample, a physical unit the supplier has formally approved as the benchmark for the bulk order. But a countersample is only as enforceable as the contract it is embedded in. The countersample is the evidence. The contract is what makes that evidence actionable. One lesson I've learned is that a supplier's willingness to formally sign off on a countersample tells you more about how the relationship will go than almost anything they say in the sales conversation. That contract carries weight. A written purchase agreement should specify product specifications, inspection and acceptance standards, delivery timelines, penalties for non-conformance, and a dispute resolution mechanism. Enforceability under Chinese law is genuinely complex. The U.S. government's Doing Business in China guidance on trade.gov addresses this directly, so an internet template is no substitute for qualified legal counsel when the order value justifies it. On payment, never wire 100% upfront to an unverified supplier. Use staged payments tied to milestones. Some buyers negotiate a 30% deposit with the balance after a past pre-shipment inspection, but terms vary widely and are negotiated per deal. Combine staged payments with trade assurance escrow where available, per Alibaba's documentation. The logic is mechanical. When the final payment depends on a past inspection, the supplier's incentive aligns with delivering conforming goods. If your product is branded or proprietary, protect it before you expose it. The International Trade Administration's guidance on protecting IP in China is clear that China runs a first-to-file trademark system. In plain terms, ownership follows whoever registers first, not whoever invented the brand or sold it first elsewhere. The practical consequence is uncomfortable. A competitor, a broker, or even your own supplier can register your name in China and then block your shipments or charge you to release your own goods. It has happened to well-known brands. Registration goes through China's National Intellectual Property Administration, CNIPA, and it must happen before you hand over detailed specifications, because once a manufacturer holds your design, the leverage shifts to them. Finally, compliance, and here is why it belongs on your radar early, not at the end. According to CBP's own Importing into the United States guide, liability sits with the importer regardless of what a supplier claims. Requirements vary sharply by category. Children's products under CPSC and CPSEA, electronics typically under FCC, food contact items under FDA. Distinct frameworks with different testing and labeling rules. A compliance failure usually surfaces at the border, after you have already paid and produced, which makes it one of the most expensive failures to discover late. Identify your category's requirements through CBP, CPSC, FDA, or FCC guidance before your first shipment. Now the part that ties it together and turns a scattered set of checks into one comparable number. The Import Smarter Supplier Confidence Score, or ISCS, is our own educational framework developed to help importers organize supplier due diligence. It is not an official industry standard. Its value is twofold. The 10 categories double as the order you should work through, and the total gives you a way to compare several suppliers objectively instead of on gut feel. Score each category from 0 to 10 and work them roughly in this sequence. 1. Business registration verification, confirmed on SAMR. 2. Factory verification, a real manufacturer, not an unverified trading company. 3. Audit status, an independent third-party audit completed unannounced if risk is high. 4. Sample approval, a signed countersample on file. 5. Contract quality, specs, penalties, and dispute resolution defined. 6. Payment security, staged payments and escrow in place. 7. Intellectual property review, CNIPA registration filed before spec sharing. 8. Shipping and compliance documentation, category requirements verified with CBP, CPSC, FDA, or FCC. 9. Communication quality, responsive, specific, and consistent under technical questions. 10. Overall risk assessment, your own judgment after everything above. How we use the total. Below 60, we do not place a meaningful order. 60 to 79 means proceed only with a reduced order size and staged risk. 80 and above is where we are comfortable scaling. Those cutoffs are our methodology, not a rule you must adopt. But the discipline of scoring forces you to notice the one category you are about to skip. And in practice, the two categories importers skip most, registration verification and the signed countersample, are exactly the ones that are cheap before an order and nearly unrecoverable after. If you remember nothing else, remember the 4 pairings. Identity fraud is neutralized by the SAMR registry check, plus a third-party factory audit. Quality fraud is neutralized by a signed countersample embedded in a written contract, plus a pre-shipment inspection. Payment scams are neutralized by staged payments tied to milestones, plus trade assurance escrow. IP theft is neutralized by CNIPA first-to-file registration before you share any specifications. The Import Smarter approach treats verification as a scored sequence, not a checklist you complete when convenient, because every layer here exists to close a specific documented gap that someone, somewhere got burned through. The free verification worksheet and a blank ISCS scoring sheet are linked in the description, worth downloading before your next supplier conversation. If evidence-based sourcing analysis is useful to you, subscribe and drop a comment with the product category you are sourcing. compliance looks very different across electronics, textiles, and food contact items, and that difference is worth a dedicated breakdown.